The Parisian actress Sarah Bernhardt was the single most influential figure in Alphonse Mucha's life as an artist. It was his first poster for her, Gismonda, that made him famous, and he grew both as a man and an artist through his professional collaboration and friendship with the most famous stage personality of the era. Bernhardt was an artist and sculptor herself and friend to Oscar Wilde, although abandoned Wilde upon his exile to France. The posters of Mucha would influence the entire poster genre, including movie posters today. Mucha met Sarah Bernhardt for the first time in late 1894. Legend says that on St. Stephen's Day, the 26th of December, Mucha, then a humble illustrator who had been helped by local counts, was doing a favor for a friend, correcting proofs at Le Mercier's printing workshop, when the actress called the printer with an immediate demand for a new poster for her production of Gismonda. This original production starred Sarah Bernhardt as Gismonda and Lucien Guitry as Almerio. The show would go to Broadway at the Fifth Avenue Theater in December 1894 and end in February 1895. Gismonda is a Greek-set melodrama in 4 acts by Victorien Sardou and premiered at the Théâtre de la Renaissance. In 1918, the play was adapted for the now-lost film Love's Conquest. In 1918 and 1919, it was adapted into the opera Gismonda by Henry Fevrier. All the regular Le Mercier artists were on holiday, so Mucha was turned to in desperation by Bernhardt. Despite his lack of experience in designing posters, Mucha grabbed this opportunity, and to his own amazement, La Divine Sarah loved his work. Mucha's Gismonda posters were up all over Paris on the morning of January 1st, 1895, and they revolutionized poster design. The long, narrow shape, the subtle pastel colors, and the stillness of the near life-size figure introduced a note of dignity and sobriety, which were startling in their novelty. The character Gismonda is a duchess with a young son, and so that regal nature was imparted. The posters immediately became objects of desire to collectors, many of whom used clandestine methods to obtain them, either bribing bill stickers or simply going out at night and cutting them down from the buildings. Delighted with the success of Gismonda, Sarah Bernhardt immediately offered Mucha a contract to produce stage and costume designs as well as posters. Under this contract, he produced 6 more posters for her productions: The Lady of the Camellias in 1896, Lorenzaccio in 1896, The Samaritan in 1897, Medea in 1898, La Tosca in 1898, and Hamlet in 1899, where Bernhardt cross-dressed and played the male Hamlet. Mucha applied to these posters the same design principle as that he had developed for Gismonda, the use of an elongated format, with a single full standing figure of the actress placed in a raised shallow alcove like a saint. Halos would also appear. Sarah Bernhardt considered The Lady of the Camellias by Alexandre Dumas to be the key drama in her repertoire. She played the title role, the courtesan Camille, who is dying of consumption and releases her lover from his promise to marry her. Mucha captures the tragedy of this tale with shocking impact. The grief-stricken heroine leans wearily against a balustrade and is flanked by a background of silver stars. In her hair is a white camellia. Another camellia, this time symbolizing death, is held up by a hand at the bottom of the poster. This smooth-stemmed plant contrasts with the thorny roses, piercing the hearts at the top of the design, evoking the play's principal theme, love's ultimate sacrifice and love over death. This poster became one of Bernhardt's favorites, and she used the design again for her American tour in 1905 and 1906 and 1910 and 1911. She cross-dressed again and played the male character of Lorenzo de' Medici in Alfred de Musset's romantic tragedy Lorenzaccio of 1834. Set in 16th century Florence, the plot tells of how Lorenzo de' Medici kills Florence's tyrant, Alessandro de' Medici, depicted by Mucha as a snaring dragon menacing the coat of arms of the city of Florence in the upper part of the poster. Bernhardt, portrayed face-on, contemplates the murder, symbolized by a dagger piercing the tyrannous dragon at the foot of the poster. The background is reminiscent of Florentine velvet. Bernhardt was baptized into the Catholic faith despite being half Jewish. And so the themes of dragons, St. George's dragon, were very common and would have been well known to European audiences at the time. In Medea, Mucha captures the compelling stage presence of Sarah Bernhardt in the famous Greek tragedy Medea. This play tells how Medea discovers her husband Jason's infidelity and kills their 2 children. The substance of the tragedy is embodied in the tense, wide-eyed expression of the actress. The stylized landscape in the background shows the influence of the contemporary fashion for Japanese art and heightens the exotic atmosphere of the drama. The figure of Bernhardt appears as a giant exclamation point. The bracelet worn by Medea is a prototype of Mucha's snake bracelet, now held by the Sakai City Collection of Japan. This was commissioned by Sarah Bernhardt from the jeweler Georges Fouquet, and she would wear the piece. Mucha's approach to women as models cannot be understated. He depicted them as beautiful personalities and not just objects of entertainment like fellow poster designer Toulouse-Lautrec. With Mucha, we see a rise in nationalist art, including the push for Czech tradition and language to be taught in schools. This nationalist lean provides a great view of woman, as mother, as individual, as force to be reckoned with, and not just as sex object or degenerate muse. Mucha's instantly recognizable works feature beautiful women with long hair and flowing garments surrounded by decorative botanical motifs in delicate shades of peach, gold, and ochre. The Czech artist originally found fame via his stunningly original poster designs for Sarah Bernhardt, but is best known today for innovative advertisements, posters, and decorative works. Although Mucha resented his work's formal association with Art Nouveau, which to him represented a uniquely contemporary rather than timeless movement, the egalitarian nature of the poster and the image was instrumental in popularizing an aesthetic that to many became known simply as the style of Mucha. Born in 1860 in the small Moravian town of Ivančice, then one of the Slavic provinces of the Austrian Habsburg Empire, Mucha came of age in the era of nationalistic consciousness, a reaction against the increasing Germanization and big bank invasion of Czech culture. As such, he saw art as a means of responding to his nation's need for cultural representation. These aspirations were put on hold following his rejection from the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague. Mucha was forced to earn a living as an apprentice scene painter in Vienna and then as a portrait painter in the Moravian town of Mikulov. His talents eventually caught the eye of 2 local counts, whose patronage allowed him to gain formal training in Munich and later in Paris. So we see again the importance of noblesse oblige in Western civilization. It was in Paris that he would meet Bernhardt. The way he treated Sarah Bernhardt's poster was revolutionary, said Tomako Sato, curator of the Mucha Foundation in Prague and organizer of a survey of the artist's work at the Musée de Luxembourg in Paris. Mucha chose to portray Bernhardt in character, dressed in an embroidered gown and dramatic orchid headdress, harking back to Slavic headdresses. The poster caused a sensation. Thanks to developments in lithographic printing, Mucha, as well as artists like Lautrec and Théophile Steinlen, took daring risks in their designs. Paris entered a golden age of poster art in the 1890s. The streets turned into veritable open-air art exhibitions. Yet nothing like Mucha's design had been seen before. While the work's muted pastel palette was in marked contrast to the bolder color schemes prevalent in poster art of the time, it was the extremely narrow, life-size composition of Mucha's design that was truly groundbreaking. Some scholars suggest that it was the Japanese scroll influence on the format, as these scrolls were being imported heavily into France at the time. The collaboration between Mucha and Bernhardt was mutually beneficial. Mucha's posters immortalized the divine image of the actress, consolidating her iconic status and providing fodder for newspapers. For her part, Bernhardt was so enamored with Mucha's work that after 1896, she made use of his designs for all posters advertising her American tours. This promoted Mucha's work and helped him secure a foothold to explore a new career in the United States after 1904. His association with the celebrated performer led to a flood of commissions, and the partnership also benefited his artistic development. To produce his images of Bernhardt, he carefully studied her performances and noted the particular magic of her movements. The costumes he designed for her were meant to enhance her gestures. As Bernhardt sat, stood, or turned, the diaphanous fabric of her dress would swirl around her. These flowing movements later found their way into his commercial and decorative work. Bernhardt was an actress in many ways. She was born Henrietta Rosine Bernard in 1844 Paris to a Dutch courtesan, and the young ingenue grew up surrounded by the opulence and scandal of her mother's world, knowing that she would inherit upon the age of majority money from her father's family, who refused to know her. At 18, she changed her name and made her stage debut in Racine's Iphigenia, beginning her storied rise to stardom. With an unquenchable desire to dominate the theatrical world, Bernhardt attacked each role with a fervor that left the audience captivated. She also insisted on getting to know the authors, such as Victor Hugo and Alexander Dumas. Considered one of the first true celebrities, Bernhardt's entire life was public knowledge. Hearst was sure to include her in his newspapers in San Francisco, and so she was subjected to public scrutiny. She used her public notoriety to bring attention to her pursuits. As highlighted by NPR, she morphed from a figure of scandal as the fatherless daughter of a Jewish courtesan who was very promiscuous herself. She started an affair with Victor Hugo when he was married and 70 and she was 27, into a magnificent artist and then into a symbol of an ambassador for France. Her involvement in French welfare work during the Napoleonic Wars is still discussed today. Mucha's best-known work is largely populated by incarnations of Bernhardt's characters, each strong, sleek, and imposing, adorned with the style and intricacies of his masterful Art Nouveau hand. Bernhardt's professional image was literally crafted by her talented friend, and it paved the way for her widespread popularity. Just as her career was bolstered by his artistic support, his early success hinged on the advertising opportunities given to him by his friend. Later tours of hers often featured adaptations of earlier Mucha productions. The rarely seen posters feature entirely different titles and text, and they deviate from Mucha's original bright colors, compared with the subtle pastels from his earlier versions. Sarah Bernhardt used smaller and less colorful versions of the Mucha images to promote her first of 3 American tours starting in 1905. The absence of Mucha's signature on her posters suggests that later designs were merely inspired by Mucha, but not created by him. Throughout her 60-year career on the stage and later on the screen, Divine Sarah, as she was known, played every notable role available to her. Joan of Arc, Hamlet, or Queen Elizabeth, she drew the praise of crowds wherever she went. She severely hurt her leg during a performance of La Tosca in 1914, to her own severe irritation. She was so distressed at her inability to continue performing and her impatience at the lengthy recovery time she was experiencing that she resolved to cut her leg off so she could get back to what mattered most, her acting. In February 1915, she wrote to her surgeon and one of her many lovers, Samuel Pawsey, asking him to remove the limb immediately. He did. She had a customized sedan chair made so she could be carried around rather than a wooden leg. She continued to act until her death 8 years later. While her climb to infamy could never be attributed to anyone but Bernhardt herself, her reliance on Mucha's promotional imagery was an integral and brilliant strategy to cultivate her celebrity forever. Mucha's posters bolstered Bernhardt's decimation, appeal, and success, and her career allowed the young designer to master one of the most influential artistic and design movements as well as mediums of all time. Together, they spawned decades of cultural innovation and expression, effectively molding French identity at the turn of the century. Mucha was Czech, but he took on French advertising opportunities and so melded with the French art scene of the time. The Parisian printer Ferdinand Champenois recognized the commercial possibilities of Mucha's style and offered the artist an exclusive commercial contract. He went on to design posters for brands such as J.O.B. cigarette papers in 1896, Chocolat Ideal in 1897, and Moet and Chandon in 1899. All of these advertisements included a version of the so-called Mucha woman, now using all of her ethereal charms to communicate the desirability of a product. The French language posters led to him being visually adopted by France. He also embarked on a wholly new endeavor, the creation of purely decorative panels for domestic use. His delightful aesthetic perfectly lent itself to panel series such as The Times of Day or The Flowers, which feature women embodying the themes set against detailed botanical backdrops. His patriotic feelings never ceased, leading him to increasingly incorporate Slavic motifs in his work. These appeared in the form of florals, inspired by Moravian folk arts, or in prominently placed discs, which for Mucha recalled Byzantine icons. In Byzantine Heads from 1897, the images of two women wearing luxurious hair ornaments are set in circular frames, surrounded by an exquisite lacework pattern which was influenced by Moravian craftwork. He also referenced the geometric patterns familiar in Czech Baroque churches in the decorative surrounds of series such as The Seasons of 1896. Czech audiences would have recognized all of these references. Mucha's success was in part a product of good timing. France enjoyed close cultural relations with the Slavic nation of Russia, and bolstered by a visit from Tsar Nicholas II in 1896, a wave of Russophilia swept through Paris. You can learn more about the Romanovs in their videos on this channel. Mucha's star only continued to rise. In 1896, poet and novelist Léon Deschamps, founder of the French art magazine Le Plume, asked Mucha to join the Salon de Cent. He was given a major retrospective there the following year. 6 editions of Le Plume devoted to the artist served as a catalog for the exhibition, which further spread his fame as it toured Europe. During this time, Mucha's style was linked with Art Nouveau. The movement's focus on natural motifs and flowing organic lines had much in common with his own work, but he was dismissive of the movement's name. Art Nouveau was new art. He thought art should be permanent, universal, or timeless. Nevertheless, his work was instrumental in popularizing the Art Nouveau aesthetic, especially as it moved to furniture. In 1904, Mucha traveled to New York for a 2-month visit. His fame was evident even across the Atlantic, due in part to Sarah Bernhardt, and he was greeted like a celebrity. Although he produced posters for American actresses such as Leslie Carter, his primary aim in the United States was to raise funds for a new project that was dear to his heart, the Slav Epic, a cycle of 20 paintings that he conceived as a monument to Slavic unity and the Slavic people. In 1910, he returned to his homeland after a 25-year absence spent in France and the United States to concentrate on its creation, accepting only outside commissions that would promote Czech cultural or philanthropic events. It cannot be understated the importance of businessmen and artists in selecting carefully who they choose to do business with to support their own people. In his 1911 poster for Czech composer Oscar Wilde's ballet pantomime Princess Hyacinth, for example, his traditional style takes on a fairy tale element. Mucha was able to present the completed Slav epic to the city of Prague in 1928, 10 years after the founding of an independent Czechoslovakia. 11 years later, the Nazis marched into the city inspired by the Austrian Habsburg Empire and declared it a protectorate. With his potential connections to the Czech Freemasons, where the Nazis had banned Freemasonry and many other secret societies in their efforts to focus on the people, or folk, Mucha was arrested and questioned by the Gestapo. According to the Diary of the Winners Project, the Nazis had information about Mucha's membership in the secretive Czech Masonic movement. He is believed to have joined a Mason's lodge in Paris at the turn of the century, which many artists did. From 1922 until 1938, Mucha exerted considerable influence in the circle in Czechoslovakia. It is said that he was called the Grand Commander. Even his residence, the historic Ziborow Chateau, is regarded as a meeting place for the Masonic Grand Masters. In weak health and with his spirit broken, Mucha died shortly after his release from pneumonia. He was interred in the Slavin Monument in Prague's Vyšehrad Cemetery, the final resting place of many great Czechs. His monument bears the inscription, "Though dead, they still speak to us." His work continues to do just that. Largely disseminated through posters, one of the most important and egalitarian forms of visual communication, Mucha largely defined a glamorous era that continues to excite the public imagination. His unique sense of design and powerfully sensuous line have ensured that even his most commercial works transcended their original purpose to become artworks in their own right, reproduced throughout the world to this day.